Somehow, we got stuck organizing the first spring barbecue. This is me, Ronald Wilson, aka Ham, but I'll tell you about that later. My wife Haley was very pleased with herself this 1st of April. We had been married for almost 3 years and bought our house right after the Christmas holidays. Haley and I loved our house, especially our little cul-de-sac in Albany, Louisiana. I know that's too loud to say. Funny thing is, we were about 12 kilometers on the other side of Albany, off Interstate 55. So most locals joke that the first people to settle there must have somehow hated Albany but were too dumb to say no. There were several couples our age in the area, some with kids, some without. We were one of those couples, and Haley stopped taking birth control at the end of February, so we could start a family. We got a lot of criticism from our friend's neighbor and both sets of parents. I was grilling, a brand new grill that cooked and smoked with wood pellets. It was a joint Christmas gift from Haley and her parents. I surveyed my yard, watching as 15 or 20 neighbors enjoyed themselves while I flipped and packed briskets. I was just about to serve some alligator tail appetizers when I realized I needed to pee. As I turned down the hallway, I abruptly stopped. Right outside the bathroom door, Dane Wilson was romantically kissing Haley. His hand was under her blouse, and I realized Haley wasn't wearing a bra for the occasion. Why was my wife kissing my friend? That was the only question I asked myself before springing into action. In an instant, I was next to him, grabbing him by the back of his head and slamming him into the wall inches from my wife's face. Unfortunately, the impact hit the door frame instead of the drywall, and Dane's nose shattered as he slumped. Before he could hit the floor, I delivered a strong kick to his groin. After he collapsed, nearly unconscious, I kicked him a few more times for good measure. During all this commotion, most of our guests had already gathered inside the house. I was being held back and dragged by at least 3 guys, while Haley was sobbing and wailing. 3 or 4 of the neighbor guys pulled me out through the back door onto the porch. I was worried about the appetizers. At that moment, several things were bothering me, which I'll tell you about later, although despite spending so much money on brisket, I didn't want it to overcook. The men held me for a few minutes while chaos reigned inside. I heard someone calling for an ambulance and asking for wet towels. Haley was still screaming, "Oh my God!" Eventually, I convinced my concerned neighbors that I was okay, so they led me to the staircase leading down to the backyard and told me to stay put. Moments later, I heard the wail of several sirens. You might think in a small town like Louisiana, you could defend your wife's virtue in your own home, but it turned out not to be the case. The cop, Harley, whom I knew from high school, cuffed me, expressing his regret. At the local sheriff's office, I was detained and thrown into a cell, waiting to be taken to the county jail. My dad wouldn't understand, so I called my cousin Jarrett. I told him what had happened so Dad could hire me a lawyer. Later, when I was sitting in the county jail, I was calm enough to think, what the hell was my wife doing kissing Dane? It never even crossed my mind that she would do something like that. She had always been so loving and attentive to me. It must be because of that jerk, Dane. We'd hung out a bit since moving into this cul-de-sac, played darts at the local pub, and gone river fishing a few times. What I knew about him was little. We only talked about manly stuff. I knew he grew up in the suburbs of New Orleans and attended a prestigious law school up north. He never finished school because his father's business went under. One thing you learn in our backwoods is to notice how a person behaves. If there was one thing I didn't like about Dane Hudson, it was how he acted around me there, by the river, but around people he was a different person. As I understood it, he was trying to prove something to himself, and in doing so, to everyone else. I got the impression that he didn't feel too good about himself because of his college failure. I mean, he still had a good job as a lawyer at the county center. By comparison, I spent 2 years at the local college and worked as a graphic designer at a local printing shop. This still didn't explain why my wife was kissing him in our hallway. I thought I was defending her honor, but looking back, I see she wasn't resisting at all. It didn't make any sense, considering what their lips were doing and where his hand was. Maybe I overreacted a bit. Yeah, I had a quick temper. It had shown before. Mom and Dad were always mad and worried about me at the same time. In high school, I played as a defender and midfielder. That was in my freshman year. After 3 games into the season, I returned to the practice field after dark, hoping to find my watch. Grandma gave it to me for my birthday, and I'd be in deep shit if I lost it. I shone my flashlight toward the bench and was about to give up when I heard a muffled female voice coming from the bleachers. I directed the flashlight in that direction. There were Billy Ray and Elmer, 2 guys I knew from elementary school. Billy Ray had his hand over the girl's mouth. I yelled, "Hey, what's going on?" and headed toward them. Elmer stepped out from under the bleachers. "This ain't your business, Ronnie," he said as a warning. By then, I was close enough to see that it was Marley, the girl I had a crush on back in high school. I asked what's going on here. I ignored Elmer's statement. Elmer made a mistake. He didn't make a move, but he swung. He swung terribly wrong, and I hit him in the lower ribs, making him double over. As I kept approaching Billy, he positioned Marley in front of him, still covering her mouth with one hand and holding her neck with the other. "Just walk away, Ronnie," he warned. His voice didn't sound as confident. By then, I had a pretty good idea of what was going on. "Let her go, Billy Ray," I commanded, "or you'll get a beating." "I can't, Ronnie." He looked desperate. "I'm not going to jail for rape. Come any closer, and I'll kill her." I wasn't the smartest, but Billy always lagged a few brain cells behind. His sister, a year older, always joked, "This boy's cornbread ain't done yet." "So," I said more calmly now, "you're going to kill her, then me, and then hide all the evidence? Because 2 murders get you 50 to life, and attempted rape probably about 3. And Billy, I can promise you won't kill me, not even on your best day." I think Billy was about to let her go, but then he saw Elmer coming at me from behind. Elmer was a big guy, raised on a farm. He hit me hard, and I swear, he broke my collarbone. And then something happened to me. In a fit of blind rage, even much later, I could only recall brief fragments of the ensuing fight. Both Billy Ray and Elmer ended up in the hospital. Elmer had a concussion and was out for several days. Billy had a broken wrist, 3 fingers, 2 ribs, and his kneecap shattered. His face looked like the local mud track on race day. In the end, I got a fractured collarbone and spent a night in the hospital. Billy Ray's and Elmer's parents pressed charges for assault, but it was Marley's father who came to my rescue. He had a brother who worked as a county prosecutor, and Marley's father persuaded them to drop the charges. That year, I didn't get to play football, but I unexpectedly became popular. Things were different in my sophomore year. I worked hard to make the starting lineup. I hit hard, or so I was told. Local rival teams started calling me Waterboy, like in Adam Sandler's movie. None of my teammates had that, so I earned the nickname Hammer, which later just became Ham. Unlike in that movie, I didn't get a scholarship. We never made it to the state team. Our team was lousy, except for me and a defender, and we ended the season with a 6-5 loss. Our town was too small for scouts to bother wasting their time. I never minded because I had plenty of friends, and I was known as a big shot in a small pond. Marley stuck around throughout graduation. She was heading to Texas University, so we quietly said goodbye, though she kept in touch during freshman year. She was also the one who convinced me to enroll in the local college. I really liked that girl. My next altercation happened right after finishing the last semester before getting my bachelor's degree. It was a stupid bar fight, and I still wonder why I got into it instead of just running out the door. I didn't have any friends at the bar, and even though I knew a lot of the guys, I didn't engage in fights. I was drunk and flew into a rage when I got hit with a beer bottle on the head. However, luck was on my side again as the judge sorted out the instigators and released about 15 of us with a warning. The charges remained on our records. So, I sat and waited until morning to escape and talk to my wife. But that didn't happen. Dad couldn't find me a lawyer so quickly, or maybe didn't try very hard, but in the end, I hired a public defender. Judge Tabbs had a stern expression on his face as the prosecutor read out the charges and described Dane's injuries. I guess I went a little crazy. "Mr. Wilson," he addressed me, "I'm not inclined to grant bail in this case. It's presumed you'll attempt to flee." I turned to my lawyer and told him I could barely afford gas, let alone a plane ticket. I was detained and returned to the county jail. 3 hours later, I was taken to a room where my lawyer and Haley were sitting. He explained what would happen next and explained that Dad finally hired a lawyer for me, whom I would meet the next morning. He reiterated what I was charged with and instructed me not to say a word to anyone, not even my cellmate. Then he left me alone with my wife. "Oh, Ham," she exclaimed as he left the room. "I feel terrible about my role in this. I just feel awful." What she said didn't make any sense, so I just sat there and looked at her. It seemed like she finally realized it. "It was a joke, Ham," she whimpered. "A stupid April Fool's joke. Why did you have to hurt him so much? Funny how when you love someone so much and trust them, or maybe just funny how I am." She suddenly seemed overly dramatic to me, but acted no differently than usual. I couldn't decide if it was because I was so angry at her or something else, but it seemed like I saw through her. "A joke?" I asked skeptically. Why? "I'm so sorry, Ham." At least her voice sounded guilty. "He said it would be funny, and our joke would be a hit with the neighbors. He said everyone knew you were a big shot in high school. I was so proud of our home, of you at the barbecue, that I stupidly agreed. After what happened, I realized it was a stupid thing to do." "A stupid thing to do," I replied, "would be to act like you described, except I saw you two kissing. It wasn't the first time." He put his hand on your bare chest. "April Fool's prank won't cut it, Haley." She studied my face for a few moments, trying to find anything that could confirm my words. She didn't see anything that could reassure her. "Why did you have to play the tough guy?" She changed direction. "You're in big trouble, Ham. He'll need surgery on his nose. He has broken ribs because you stomped on him. I heard from his brother that he lost both testicles and may have Peyronie's disease." "It takes two to tango," I smirked. "You were at the hospital to visit your lover, weren't you?" Haley was clearly annoyed that I wasn't as mentally challenged as she thought. "We have serious problems." Her voice grew louder. "I decided to see if I could help you by reminding him that we both started all this with that stupid prank. He doesn't care. He wants blood. He said you'll go to prison, and he'll be waiting for you when you get out." "Great," I sighed. "Now I have to worry about some nut job coming after me. Make sure he knows my friends' list far exceeds his. Whatever happens to me, happens to him, threefold." "Stop spouting macho nonsense, Ham," she said to me. "We made a very big mistake, but you're facing prison time. I can't live like this. I've never seen you like this. I don't think I've ever seen anyone behave like this. Now I'm afraid of you." "It seems you're missing the obvious, Haley." I leaned my face closer to hers. "Who said I want to live with you? I'll let you stay in the house while I sort this out, but then you should make a plan of where you'll live." "This is my house too." She grew more bold. "Our names are on the documents. You're my husband, and so you better pull your head out of your ass, or you'll mess everything up." "Get the hell out," I growled softly. At first, she didn't move, then I reached out to her, and she flinched. Of course, my wrist was handcuffed to the chair. Haley stood up, looking at me with, I can't say I've ever seen such a look before. Was it despair or pity? She quietly knocked on the door, then turned around over her shoulder. "I'll be back in a few days, Ham, when you've calmed down enough." My soon-to-be ex-wife was suffering from hallucinations. Back then, I was sure he was hitting on her. She took it as an adventure. Now she was trying to kick my ass. Just begged 1 minute, then threatened and demanded the next. I wouldn't stand for it, even if it meant going to jail. Maybe I made a mistake marrying her, but damn if they both thought they could get rid of me so easily. A few hours later, I sat in the same chair, meeting with Jonathan Ternes, the lawyer my cousin hired. He was a big, tall guy with a bushy head of hair and an imposing presence. I liked his no-nonsense approach. "Mr. Hudson has serious injuries," he informed me. "If you're found guilty, you're looking at 3 to 5 years. If we can prove you were defending your wife and home, well, that's the best-case scenario. It'll depend on the judge we get. I think the best strategy is to put you in full defense mode. You saw a man attacking your wife. That means you weren't watching, just reacting." I had to agree with him. We discussed how to build the case around that defense and what I could expect in court if I didn't decide to plead guilty. There was no bail. I spent some time explaining that I wanted Mr. Tierney's to communicate with my cousin. I planned to transfer payments for the house to a separate bank account but not pay the mortgage. Haley wouldn't be able to afford it unless she asked her parents for help. I hoped to stay out of jail until the bank decided to foreclose, but I wasn't going to keep paying for my wife to live there with no money. This move would probably also push her to move somewhere else, maybe to her parents or to the eunuch. Work was a different story. Jared talked to one of my best work buddies, Darren McDonald. The printing shop was small and privately owned. Losing an employee wasn't good for business. If they couldn't meet deadlines, they'd lose clients. Darren did everything he could to smooth things over with the owners. He succeeded, but only temporarily. The question of my employment hung in the air. For days later, Haley came to me again, but I refused. I had no idea if she was upset, disappointed, or felt relieved. 2 days later, Mr. Tierney's told me the details of the plea deal, and I turned it down. We were headed to court. All of this took almost 45 days. Haley was there with my cousin Jared and my parents. At first, they sat together, probably out of solidarity. However, after the first week, I only saw Haley occasionally. When my parents visited me in jail, they told me she was angry because I refused to meet with her. While the prosecution presented its arguments, Mr. Tierney spoke with me during the morning break. "I need you to talk to your wife," he began. "During the trial, the jurors pay attention to many things, Ronald, and when they see that your own wife doesn't support you, they start to doubt. We need to present a united front. I know you're upset about what she did, but remember, our strategy is to portray Mr. Woodson as the aggressor and both of you as victims." I understood what he was talking about and had been thinking along the same lines. Damn it, if she could pull off such a performance, then so could I. Haley seemed concerned to me, but perhaps she was just worn out. I couldn't say anymore. It was just another sad discovery. "Hey, Ham," she said solemnly. "How are you holding up?" "Fine," I replied to her without much emotion. "And you?" She didn't answer but seemed to scan the room, avoiding my gaze. "We're done, aren't we?" she finally asked. "Not sure," I shrugged. "We have a lot to figure out before I can answer that question. Maybe you'll start with some explanations and stop these insane April Fool's jokes?" "It's not what you think," she replied. "It was a joke. The problem is, I can't understand why I agreed to it in the first place. I know it looks ugly, how it must look, but I swear, it was just one instance. How can I make you believe me?" I thought about it, refraining from answering. I pondered it thoroughly in my cell. "All right, Haley," I sighed deeply. "I'll speak calmly and tell you the truth. I guess I owe you a lot. What I saw wasn't like the first time. There was nothing awkward about it. Your eyes were closed. With one hand, you were embracing him around the neck, and with the other, around the waist. I saw him fondling your breasts without hesitation. You looked like old lovers. So, were you acquainted with him before he moved to this neighborhood, or did you become friends during the few months since his arrival?" Haley tried to keep her composure. She swore she met him just a few months ago on a neighborhood stroll, where we both were. I didn't believe her. Her posture, her eyes, nothing seemed right to me. Worst of all, I saw her for who she truly was. Now I saw a selfish girl. The trial continued, and Haley was in court, probably at my lawyer's insistence. The biggest problem was that all our neighbors turned against me. Their testimonies contradicted our planned defense. I guess I couldn't blame them. They didn't want to live on the same street as a lunatic. I can't burden you with details because most of the time in court, I didn't pay much attention to it. Mr. Tierney's put on quite a show, narrating the timeline of events and how I reacted in split seconds. In the end, it wasn't enough. I was convicted. I'll never forget the expressions on my parents' faces. Even Haley was crying. 3 days later, I stood before the court to hear my sentence and whatever the judge wanted to say. "Mr. Wilson," he cleared his throat, "the jury, consisting of your neighbors, has found you guilty. Despite the incident occurring in your own home, excessive force was found to have been applied. I sincerely regret the cruel, so-called prank you committed, and I hope the time spent in prison serves as a lesson for reflection. I hope you learn to control your temper which has manifested in other instances, to become a productive member of society. I hereby sentence you to 1 year of imprisonment in the state penitentiary." He banged his gavel, and that was the end of it. During my first week in prison, I learned to control my temper. My cellmate took me under his wing. He was a lifelong inmate who had killed his wife and her lover in their marital bed, so I guess he felt some kinship with me. I underwent an accelerated course on when, how, and where to channel my restrained anger. The others soon realized that among all the fresh meat, I probably wasn't worth the effort. During the trial, I spent exactly 54 days in the county jail. Mr. Ternes told me it would be credited toward the end of the 1-year term. He gave me the opportunity to appeal, but given the circumstances and my financial situation, it was best to just serve my time. I had been there for almost 2 months when Haley finally visited me. I didn't expect to see her again, especially after she found out I wasn't paying for the house. I expected her to offer me a deal funded by her parents. What she came to say exceeded all my expectations. "There's no point beating around the bush," she began.
I'm pregnant.
"We're having a baby." I think my inaction gave her the opportunity to continue. "Isn't it wonderful, darling? We're going to be parents, and you'll have plenty of time to bond with our baby." "Whose baby is it?" I asked with a vacant stare. She turned to look at me. "What the hell are you talking about?" She snapped back, switching to the offensive. "I just told you. I haven't slept with anyone, you bastard." "I'm not buying it," I stated coldly. Haley started crying fake tears. "What's wrong with you, him?" She screamed. "You're breaking my heart." I just sat there, staring at the empty wall. Finally, Haley got up and headed for the door. "I need you to find a way to pay for the house. We need shelter now more than ever. Please talk to your parents." Instead, I contacted my lawyer. When I told him what my supposedly loving wife had said, he shook his head. "Did she tell you how far along she is?" I didn't ask, and I didn't pay attention. "What do you want to do?" he asked grimly. "I want her to be examined as soon as possible. Give me the name of a divorce lawyer." "Ron," he said, patting my shoulder in a fatherly manner. "You can't even afford to pay my bill, and you don't know if you'll have a job when you get out. How about I find the forms online, fill them out, add an extra hour to your bill, and you try to get her to sign? I can certainly file for paternity." Prison overcrowding is an issue even in Louisiana. It's surprising, but I didn't look a gift horse in the mouth. I was released after serving 3 months plus 54 days, as far as I can recall. The only downside was having to wear an ankle bracelet for the first 2 months of probation. Getting released was sheer luck. The bank would have changed the locks on the house in 5 days. Haley pretended to be thrilled about my return home. As soon as I sent Haley out for pizza, I talked to my cousin. He told me that the money from my second account covers only about 90% of the total mortgage debt, minus interest. He'll have to pitch in if I want to keep the house. I quickly agreed. When Haley returned, we sat down and quietly ate. "We're going to lose the house." I feigned sadness about it. "I found out about it today." "I don't want to talk about anything tonight," she said with false hope. "We can deal with the consequences of this mess tomorrow. Tonight, after dinner, all I want is to make love with my husband. It's been too long." She was definitely full of surprises. I knew she had received the letter, and Ternes had warned her in advance that she would be served with paternity papers. "Haley," I looked at her as if I didn't even know her. "I know you received the notification. There won't be any sex until I see results confirming that it's my child." Haley stumbled and whimpered. She screamed that I was being cruel. She threw a fit, and it didn't go unnoticed. I began to understand what acting was, and it made me sick. Then I thought about my cellmate and his teachings. The chair flew out from behind me as I jumped up in anger. "Leave me alone." I clenched my fists. "When I see the results, we can talk about our future, but not before." Haley paled and headed to our bedroom, not even breaking eye contact with me. Later, I went to open the bedroom door, and she yelled out, "Sleep on the couch." The next day, after Haley left for work, or whatever she was doing at that time, I called the bank following my cousin, who handled the payments. I wanted to find out the payoff amount. Then I found a realtor, Mrs. Alice Burns, who came to see me in the afternoon. No matter what a monster Haley had become, she still kept the house in perfect order. We would make a little more than what the house was worth, maybe $30,000 more, or slightly less, but I could pay Mr. Tierney's, so it suited me. I asked the realtor to put up the sign as soon as possible. Then I offered an additional percentage if she could sell it within 30 days. I already had a pretty clear idea of how the paternity test would go. She smiled and thanked me but declined the offer. She was good enough to sell it. Haley returned home from work late. I had a feeling the eunuch wasn't fully recovered yet, and I pondered. Haley came in and handed me an envelope with the test results. Even if she noticed the for sale sign, she probably thought the bank had put it up. "I hope you're happy," she grumbled. "I'm so mad at you, Ham. My eyes are practically rolling out of my head. I have no idea how you plan to make amends, but it's going to take a lot of time and a ton of sucking up." I thoughtfully tried to understand what I ever saw in her. "Thanks," was my terse response. Later, as I sat watching a football game, I opened the results. I couldn't believe my eyes. Could it be that she just took the results and didn't ask the doctor any questions? Or was she hoping I wouldn't read the report? The results showed that the probability of me being the father was 2.03%. Sometime later, she waltzed into the living room and sat at the other end of the couch. "Can we stop all this and talk a little about our future?" she asked very sweetly. "What future?" I calmly replied. She looked at me strangely somehow. For a moment, I thought she just misunderstood me. "Now that you know the child is yours," she said, as if not understanding my question, "we need to clarify the situation and continue living our lives." "These documents say I'm not the father," I said as if nothing was wrong. "What are you up to? Another prank?" She immediately went on the defensive. "Ham, what the hell?" She raised her voice. "It says here that you're the father. 98%. I handed her the document. "I can't believe you're that stupid, Haley," I said. I went out to the backyard. Haley never came out, and as usual, the bedroom door was locked when I checked later. The next day, Haley didn't come home from work. Something felt off in the house, and upon further inspection, most of her belongings were missing. There was a note on the TV remote saying she left. She was sorry, blah blah blah. I started to wonder if I was experiencing Groundhog Day, April Fool's Day all over again. Sitting there, without her presence in the house, I began to ponder something. Could the eunuch have coached her to try to incite violence against me? Perhaps send me back to prison so they could enjoy each other and keep most of my things? It made sense, but why bother? Why didn't she just run away with him? I wrote to her, "Coward." Or was she just crazy? I thought it would be useful to end it. It was then that I realized she never respected me. She thought I was so stupid she could keep playing with me until I ran out of breath. I was sure Hudson was instigating her. It was a quiet evening at home. I didn't suspect that, while I was in prison, I had already written off Haley. I knew I didn't like her, and I didn't love her, but it was nice to just be home without her. It didn't last long. It was 2:03. That's what my old-fashioned alarm clock showed. I could barely see the clock through the smoke. Jumping out of bed, I ran through the bedroom door into the hallway. There was a lot of smoke. Damn, the house was on fire. It got to the point where trying to put it out was impossible. I would die from smoke inhalation before even starting to put it out. I ran back to the bedroom and opened the window to assess the situation. Under the window grew a hydrangea bush. It was small, but it could cushion the fall if I could land and roll. That was a big if. Instead, I decided to wrap the top half of my body with the blanket, pulling on my pants beforehand. I didn't have time. 1, 2, 2.5. Down below, at ground level, it was much hotter. I rolled, but not as gracefully as one would imagine in the movies. I probably wasn't cut out for stunt work. When I stood up, it was easy to tell I had sprained my ankle. I pulled out my phone from my pants pocket and dialed 911, but in the distance, sirens were already sounding. After some bustling activity, I sat down on the back step of the ambulance, wrapping my ankle. When they first hoisted me onto their stretcher, my ankle monitor hung over the railing. The police officers were kind enough to disconnect it. Then came a pleasant surprise. At first, I didn't recognize her in the sheriff's cap. It was Marley. "How are you, Ham?" She smiled brightly. As I looked at her like she was crazy, her smile faltered. "Sorry, Ham," she apologized. "Not a time for jokes. I'm glad you're okay." We talked about the fire. She told me she had been keeping an eye on my case and even did everything she could to ensure my safety and keep me out of trouble while I was in jail. It was unexpected but brought a warm feeling. Maybe it was just Marley's presence. "Do you think she did it, Ham?" She seemed unsure as she asked. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "She just left after trying to lie to me about the paternity test of her child. I think she's on the brink of a breakdown. Can we talk about it tomorrow?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Right now, I need to change your location. You're still under house arrest, even though you no longer have a home." She wasn't joking when she knocked on my cousin's door at 8:30. She took me there after all the questioning and the paramedics' inspection of my ankle. Marley was all business as we went into the kitchen, and I offered her coffee. "We're investigating your ex, I mean your wife, and possibly this Dane Hudson for arson on your house. I need details of what happened since you got out of jail." "So, it was deliberately set?" I asked for clarification. "It's still under investigation, so I can't say much. But yes, there were suspicious accelerants." I had a copy of the paternity test my lawyer demanded, and it turned out she's pregnant by someone else. I can't say for sure if it's Hudson, but the likelihood is high, unless she was messing around with different guys while I was in jail. He also threatened to get back at me for the beating I gave him, which landed me in jail. "We're aware of all that," she admitted. The dumbass said it in his sworn testimony that first day at the hospital. Jared was still in bed, but Marley leaned into me as if sharing a secret. "Hammer, if it was him, well, I'd like to know, could I help you in your situation?" "Like how?" I asked, surprised. "Would they put him in jail for that?" "Listen, you helped me out of a very tough spot." She paused. "I'll never forget what you did for me. I feel indebted to you. And that feeling is compounded by the fact that part of your rap sheet was connected to what you did to keep me from being raped." I just stared at her. Partly I was mesmerized by her beauty and smile. She was as stunning as ever. "Arson is one of the hardest crimes to prove," she started in a different direction. "Not because we don't have good forensic scientists, but because good lawyers know how to work around it. If your wife could be involved in this," she continued, "we want to try and pin it on her. Do you think you could help with that?" Marley installed a surveillance system in Jared's living room. My cousin had to pay for the equipment so he could claim it was a home security system and not be seen as conducting covert operations. He was happy to do it. According to the plan, I was supposed to invite my wife over under the pretext of possible reconciliation. I had to wait for Marley to let me know when it would happen. She promised me some satisfaction after the meeting, not the kind she said. This made me wonder if I had a chance to get a date with Marley. It seemed like she still had some feelings for me. Nevertheless, she taught me what to say and what to ask when I met with Haley. Our goal was to anger her enough to make her tell us what she didn't want. Haley's temper could help achieve a more or less decent confession. Even if Marley and I remained just friends, I wouldn't mind. I lost my job in my house, and I was convicted of a crime. Fortunately, the realtor terminated our contract. I wanted to move on with my life. A week later, I got a call. Marley rehearsed for a few minutes before giving me the green light. Haley, it seemed, really wanted to talk. Maybe this would work. Jared kept his distance from his house to give us space and, hopefully, to calm Haley down. When she arrived, I handed her a beer, and we sat facing each other in the living room. Her tight jeans and loose top were also a tactic. At least I had learned something. To start, I took a deep breath. Marley and I had discussed the strategy of appearing restrained, subdued, and ready to compromise. "How have you been, Haley?" I began. "Not great, Ham," she replied. "I miss you. I'm so sorry about the house. I know the bank was going to sell it anyway, but we had so many good memories there. I hope I have some good news, Ham. Maybe it will help me start remembering something new. She must be delusional, or she really thought I was that stupid. Just seeing her made me nauseous. Let's see, I said in a mournful tone. I think we need to be honest first. If I can't find a way to trust, then there's no point. She nodded hesitantly. I need to know, I asked slowly. How did it all start with him? Her gaze grew tense, and she suppressed a smile, relieved that I asked about her boyfriend and not about the fire. That's when I realized we had her in our hands. Okay, Ham, she replied. You're calm, right? You won't lose it? I assured her I was calm. He started flirting with me at the neighborhood party last month, she confessed, rubbing her hands on her knees, a clear sign of nervousness. It was also what she did when she lied. I flirted back, Ham, she admitted.
I'm sorry.
I was taken aback. He's handsome and made me feel good with his compliments. He came over a few times when you were at work. The third time was a week before we threw the party, and we had sex. Got it. I still played my part. Was it in our bed or somewhere else? Haley started to cry. She could barely stand, and we had essentially just begun. In our bed, she sobbed. I'm sorry. I know it's painful to realize. I don't know why I did it. She was good. I had to give her that. It was, to say the least, disheartening that what I was witnessing then, I had already seen in my assumptions. We did it again at his place, she continued, before the party. And at the party? I asked. Was it done to hint at it? Maybe, she shrugged. I don't know. He was there when I came out of the bathroom and kissed me out of nowhere. I told him to stop, that we could easily be caught. When he leaned in again, he said, "Just tell the caveman it's an April Fool's joke." So I did. And you decided that the best strategy was not to take your husband's side? I needed to focus on her feelings towards me and her subsequent actions. I didn't know what to do. Her voice finally sounded honest. I went crazy over him. Everyone looked at me with surprise, pity. I really came to see you, but you were so angry. I got scared. I didn't think he would follow through with his accusations. Then I visited him in the hospital, trying to persuade him to drop the charges, and found out the irreparable damage you had done to him. And then you found out you were pregnant, I stated. Why did you think I would agree to that? I was desperate, Ham, she cried even harder. Everything was falling apart. After you were convicted, I decided to go to him and ask if he would take me in and raise our child together. I'm so sorry. I thought that if you woke up a year from there, it would all be over between us. It was the moment of truth. So, I got out earlier, and you helped him set my house on fire? Did all your grand plans go up in smoke? No, Ham. She was on the verge of hysteria. I gave him the key, babe. That's it. He promised you wouldn't be home when he did it. That's it. I looked at her with disdain, and I know she felt it. Well, it just shows who you can trust. The ambiguity made her wonder if I was referring to her or to myself. Sorry, Ham. She couldn't hold back. I messed up big time. Can you forgive me? No, I said, standing up. I can't. I made a mistake bringing you here. I was hoping for a miracle, for anything to hold on to. You confirmed the worst. You're not. She realized her mistake and panicked. Don't involve me in what you're going to do, Ham. Please. I need to think about the baby. Don't ruin their life too. I escorted her to the door, then texted Jared. He, in turn, got in touch with Marley. I grabbed a cold beer and slumped heavily into a chair, pondering whether it would have been better to actually agree to Haley's request. It took just a few nanoseconds to realize that everything that was happening was a result of her actions. An hour later, I heard a knock at the door. At first, I thought Jared had forgotten his key. Instead, a small cardboard box lay on the mat. Maybe it was a bomb. I examined it carefully and then opened the package. Inside, I found a note and a disposable phone. The note read, "Watch the video, then destroy the phone, box, and note." I eagerly sat down at the table. The note contained a 6-digit password for the phone. There were only 3 apps on the home screen, and I opened the video. It was dark. The camera seemed to be pointed at the ground by someone's feet. I heard muffled cries of a man, likely gagged. From the sound of it, he was pleading for his life. The light turned on, revealing an enclosed area filled with something resembling mud. A crying man came into view, naked except for some cloth in his mouth. 2 other men dragged him to the fence and removed the gag. "Help! Help!" he shouted. Another voice spoke, apparently off-screen. "Keep going," he chuckled. "No one will help you here." The camera was mounted on a table or a pole. A third man came into view. I couldn't believe it. It was Billy Ray. He helped the other 2 lift Dana Hudson and toss him over the fence. Hudson thrashed around like a marlin being dragged behind a boat, wriggling and flailing from side to side. Damn, that guy knew how to scream. Dana landed in the mud on his bare behind. And then I saw and recognized that movement. Those damn guys took Hudson to one of the local alligator farms. There were 4 of them within a 20-minute drive from Natalbany. I chuckled, thinking, I hope they didn't take the old Dane to the guy who charged for family tours. 3 alligators, one of them quite large, pounced on the poor guy. Dane desperately kicked the big one at his feet. The other 2 were closing in slowly from either side. This idiot punched one of them in the eye. Obviously, Dane had never wrestled with alligators. Everyone knows you gotta hit them in the snout. It took several minutes. Alligators are always preoccupied with themselves and don't work as a team. Billy Ray approached and took the camera, zooming in on the action. "Hey, Hammer," he said cheerfully. "This is for changing my life back in school. What you did to stop what we were doing with Marley changed my life. I still owe you a beating. This guy here won't bother you anymore. Got it?" The big guy finally reached Hudson's thigh, and his powerful jaw snapped down on the struggling man's abdomen with a loud crunch, shaking from side to side, nearly tearing the old Dane in half. The other 2 quickly dealt with the upper part of his body. I watched the video again, then tossed everything into Jared's fireplace and flicked the switch on the wall. The next day, Jared showed the detectives the surveillance footage. 3 days later, Haley was arrested. The media speculated that a certain Dane Hudson, a lover, had fled the city, leaving his pregnant ex-wife to shoulder the burden. 3 months later, Haley was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. It would have been less if I hadn't been home during the fire. She gave her little girl up for adoption. I never did visit her. A week before Christmas, Jared and I were having a barbecue. There were Darren McDonald and his young fiancée. Several of my former classmates from school spent most of the day playing cornhole. Mr. Ternes and his wife Julie stopped by briefly. I guess he did it because I was still making payments. Billy Ray was there too. He pulled me aside and explained what happened to him after I prevented him from making the worst mistake of his life. Let's just say he was grateful to serve. Poor Elmer died 5 years earlier when a crane collapsed on him while he was working on an oil rig. Later that night, Marley and I were lying in bed. Turns out, this lovely lady was just as interested in me getting healthy again as I was in her becoming my new girlfriend. Oh, sorry. Woman. After all, she's a cop. "You know, baby," I said as she nestled her head against my chest, "I feel like this is the first day of a new life, our new life." She didn't respond right away. "I think," she lifted her cute face to look at me, "I think April 1st was your first day." Who am I to argue?
Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. And we'll see you on the Cheating Secrets channel.